With Pokémon presence fast approaching on February 27, 2025, it is time to take a final look before the presence and answer the following question: when will Pokémon Legends EA take place in? At first glance, you might think that the game takes place during the Victorian era, which lasted from 1837 to 1901. And initially, it seems like it might actually be correct, as the Lumio City Urban Redevelopment Plan is similar to Haussmann's renovation of Paris in the human world, which by the way started in 1853 and ended in 1870. But upon closer inspection, however, we can see that there's a small problem with this idea. You see, we know from the Illustrated Book of Pocket Monsters and the Salado University Pocket Book, which are additional content for Red and Blue, that Pokeballs were invented by Professor Westwood in Salado University in Kanto in 1925. And since Legends EA is more than likely to feature Pokeballs, it means that the game can't take place before 1925. So we can safely rule out the Victorian era and Haussmann's renovation of Paris. Another idea that gets thrown around is that the game takes place in the 1950s and 1960s, when Paris was in the process of reconstruction in the human world. And while France was indeed heavily damaged in the Great War, more commonly known as World War II, in the human world, surprisingly, its capital Paris wasn't that heavily damaged in the war, meaning that the city wasn't in dire need of reconstruction after the war. And therefore, not much, if at all, happened during the reconstruction. Fun fact, Paris was almost raised in the war when on August 23, 1944, the human world counterpart to a certain Smeagol with terrible IVs ordered the razing of the city. But the general who received the order, Dietrich von Koltitz, thankfully refused to follow the order and in the process saved Paris from being razed in the war. And even if Paris was heavily damaged in the war, look closely at the plan for Lumio City. It says Lumio City Urban Redevelopment Plan, not Lumio City Urban Rebuilding Plan or Lumio City Urban Reconstruction Plan, Lumio City Urban Redevelopment Plan, implying that Lumio City had been heavily damaged through a war or some other disaster by the time the events of Legends EA happened. So the 1950s and 1960s are also ruled out. Now, general consensus states that the game takes place in the early 21st century. And indeed, in the human world, Paris underwent a major urban redevelopment known as the Grand Paris, which started in 2016 and ended in 2030. It also means that, as of 2025, the redevelopment is still ongoing. And as you may have guessed it, this Grand Paris urban redevelopment is very similar to the Lumio City urban redevelopment plan we see in the game. And when considering that Paris hadn't undertaken in another urban redevelopment of that scale since 1925, that might actually be it. And indeed, with all other options ruled out, that was it. And that's our final answer. Pokémon Legends EA will take place anywhere from 2016 to 2030. It also means that, since X and Y is implied to take place in 2013, Legends EA will take place after the events of X and Y no matter what. However, if I had to guess the exact year Legends EA would take place in, it would be 2025, as it's the release year of the game in the human world. It is also exactly 100 years after the invention of the Pokeball. Either way, we now know what to expect come February 27th, and I'll update this as soon as the day finally comes.